Story 1. One thing I dislike about my job since joining the union is that they informed my employer that my schedule, which I loved, had to change because it was allegedly illegal. I was working 7 days on and 7 days off from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m. I enjoyed it because the 7 days off in a row allowed me to use 7 vacation days for 3 consecutive weeks off. Since it was an overnight shift, I could maintain that schedule and then transition to daytime. Now my schedule is from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and I have the Friday before my weekend and the Monday after my weekend off. So frustrating. Story 2. I used to work at a place with a union. I had to do split shifts totaling 8.5 hours a day. I received benefits and was being trained for the next step, which would have meant straight hours, better pay, and improved shifts. The union then agreed that workers doing the split shift could not be scheduled for overtime. As a result, you could only work either the 3-hour shift or the 5.5-hour shift. I lost full-time status, benefits, and future career opportunities. Story 3. During my time in graduate school as a research assistant, I encountered a situation involving a group attempting to establish a graduate student union. This group was making unfounded claims about our pay and benefits, seemingly following a template. In reality, we had favorable conditions, but their focus was primarily on portraying our situation as dire, which was largely ungrounded. I am generally very supportive of unions, and I still hold that view, but this instance made me realize that some criticisms about unions resorting to questionable political tactics, even in a scientific field, have some merit, something I had previously dismissed as standard anti-union rhetoric. Ultimately, unionization did not succeed when put to a vote. While I continue to support unions in general, I have become more cautious in my views after this experience and from observing the rhetoric used by other unions. It may also reflect my scientific background, which has instilled in me a low tolerance for rhetoric, regardless of its origin. Story 4. I did not get to vote in this election because I was not in the organized category. However, I heard representatives telling low-wage workers with very few skills that they would compel the company, which was a horizontally organized firm with many severable roles in different parts of the value chain, to pay them $50 to $100 per hour. The workers were enthusiastic and voted to unionize, and the company eliminated the department within a few weeks. This outcome was predictable and unwise. I generally support unions, but being willing to go on strike does not necessarily mean you have infinite leverage. You need to choose the right battle. Story 5. I have never voted in a unionization vote, but I have worked in union shops, including a food workers union for grocery store jobs and a stint doing overnight package sorting at a United Parcel Service Depot, which is a Teamsters shop. I have seen many positive outcomes due to the union, but there have also been significant issues, such as being forced to transfer stores when I was harassed and assaulted by a coworker who had seniority, and management being completely unable to address lazy and incompetent workers, which nearly resulted in me suffering broken bones. Union leadership often did very little for their paychecks and sometimes quoted Bible verses to justify their disdain for those who crossed picket lines. I recall union representatives encouraging people to vote in specific ways during the election of 2000. There were positive aspects as well. The United Parcel Service job offered a 5-hour shift 5 days a week with full medical coverage and overtime pay if we worked past our scheduled time. There was also tuition reimbursement. At the grocery store, I worked as a courtesy clerk and would receive cashier pay when I was asked to step in as a cashier, a difference of $3 per hour. I currently work for the government in a position designated as essential to the continuance of government operations. If the collective workforce I am a part of unionized, I am uncertain how I would vote or how my life would change if a strike were called. I would have to reserve judgment on how I would vote if I were eligible, considering their reasons for wanting to unionize, my current compensation and benefits, ample time off, and the fact that I work 95% from home. Story 6. The graduate student union was ineffective. They took pride in having our parking fees waived, while at the same time, we were the lowest paid graduate students in the state. Story 7. I worked at a hotel that was unionized, and scheduling and hours were based on seniority rather than ability or skill. Some employees had worked there for over 20 years and did the absolute bare minimum, yet they still received a full 40-hour week and the shifts they desired. Meanwhile, newer employees who wanted to do a good job were eager for more hours. I eventually left because I wasn't getting enough hours to support myself and took a job at a non-union hotel where I was given as many hours as I wanted and treated with respect by management. I could actually talk to and negotiate with them without having to go through a union representative who, to be honest, never really helped me. When a few staff members at that hotel tried to form a union, I was quite vocal about my reasons for not wanting one and said that if we did unionize, I wouldn't work there anymore. They never did unionize. Story 8. I was in a union once. All it did was take money out of my pocket and keep incompetent people employed. They harmed the new generation by creating a second tier, and then 20 years later, they hurt the newer generation by establishing a third tier. The lower tiers had limited vacation time and lower pay, and they took away the shop bonus pay. Eventually, the company wanted them to pay 100% of their own medical expenses. They voted almost unanimously against signing. The union then went on strike, and the plant closed and moved production to another location nearby. Story 9. I am in a union now, and it is fine. Most of the benefits the union secured occurred decades before I started working. With each agreement, we lose more benefits and receive smaller raises. The union protected outdated jobs for years, and until recently, the company has been falling behind the industry. When I first started in 2008, there were long-term employees whose sole duty was to staple papers and put them in envelopes, earning double what I was making. Many of them have since retired or were forced to retire, and we have seen entire departments eliminated, with the union unable to intervene. I would have supported a union in the 1970s, but the one I am in now seems ineffective. Why am I paying $20 per paycheck in union dues when they do so little for us? Our pay and benefits are slightly below industry standards. Story 10. For starters, we had it pretty good. I tell my friends when I tried to get them to apply, it's like a union job without the dues and nonsense. The people who wanted to unionize were upset about blackout dates for paid time off. The reason for the blackout dates is tied to a really good harvest last fall, so they had plenty of extra product to run an additional line for a month. Welcome to an agriculture-based business. A union won't be able to change production schedules, so it was a moot point anyway. This was not why I voted no, as I am pro-union. However, my coworkers started off by only inviting the in-group to the initial meeting and vote. Myself and others were upset about not being included. Those who did attend and vote claimed that they still had a wide majority regardless of our presence, implying we could all pound dirt. As you can imagine, the company used this to petition for a revote, which they were granted. The vote was scheduled a month out, and the company held weekly anti-union meetings to present their perspective. Union busting. I don't think I'd call it that, but it gives you an idea. Meanwhile, the union didn't do much for recruitment. I think I received one vague letter in the mail. Those who already voted kept insisting that it was 56% of employees voting yes, so it was just a waste of time. Well, the union did its thing, criticized the working conditions, ran picket lines, not our employees, just union members from other companies, and issued press releases claiming we were treated poorly. All theatrics and untruths, in my opinion. By the day of the vote, I was a solid no for multiple reasons, and enough others felt the same way, leading to a final vote of 56% no and 44% yes. Those numbers did not align with the previous vote from the in-crowd. It turns out there were people who shouldn't have been allowed to vote in the first vote. No surprise there, based on what I'd seen. Yes, the final vote was supervised by both factory management and union representatives, while the first vote was not. The whole situation really left a bad taste in my mouth and reeked of nonsense on both sides. Since the vote, though, management has significantly stepped up, and things are being addressed faster than a union could have managed. So we did win in the end. If you can get into a good union that will work for you, do it. Don't unionize if they're just going to complicate things. Story 11. I am a fan of unions when they work. I am currently in a union that is great. They support us, play fair, and care about our needs. In the past, I worked part-time at a grocery chain, and that union did not care about employees unless they were full-time. We were forced to join, and they deducted from my paycheck without offering anything in return. Story 12. I was part of a union while in state government. I generally regard unions similarly to religion. The idea is great, but the application is often lacking. It essentially made it impossible to dismiss employees, resulting in half our office being incompetent yet comfortable in their roles. When it came to hiring, the prioritization of irrelevant qualifications, such as years of state service or degrees not related to the field, led to hiring mismatches for every position. Human resources managed the hiring process, so we had little to no input on who was ultimately hired, although the department was allowed to conduct an interview during the process. Merit increases did not exist. Every single employee received the same cost of living adjustment regardless. Never again. Story 13. Always negotiate your own contract. If I can perform the job better, faster, or with more flexibility, why would I want to limit my remuneration to the lowest common denominator? Story 14. I was against unionization when I was a resident assistant in college. I felt that many of their demands were imposing ideological conformity on the members. I fully supported demands for health care, dental care, and better pay. However, I opposed demands for the university to adopt boycott, divestment, sanctions initiatives, implement race-based hiring practices for management, and provide paid time for workers to engage in activism. Those advocating for the union seemed unable to understand that not everyone agrees with progressive stances. Pressuring employees to adopt those political views felt alienating and, frankly, bullied many into conformity. Story 15. In my last job, the union representatives seemed to collaborate with management and ended up harming employees more than helping. They negotiated terms that employees had not even discussed in any agreements. In my current job, I have already negotiated my salary above the market average and do not want anyone interfering with my finances for political reasons I do not support. Story 16. Because our company was already experiencing financial difficulties, most of the workers knew that a union would cause it to collapse. A poor job is usually better than no job. Story 17. The union representative tried to intimidate me into staying at an enrollment meeting. In that moment, he embodied every negative perception of unions, and everyone in the meeting witnessed it. I walked out. Threats do not resonate well with me. Story 18. They wanted to change drug testing to giving notice, which they did. As a result, people would use drugs all night, and if testing was going to happen, they would notify their members, who would then call in sick. This led to individuals being able to evade drug testing while operating heavy machinery. Story 19. Because they protect people who should not be protected, like individuals who are intoxicated. One person came to work drunk and nearly ran over me and another coworker with a forklift, causing damage to several pallets of product. I reported him to the manager and the union representative, and they just sent him home to sober up. Story 20. I have said this for a long time. There are many unions that are run for profit, which defeats their purpose. The only individuals who should be compensated are the administrators. The leadership of the unions should not hold paid positions. Story 21. Honestly, I haven't had much positive experience with labor unions in general. That's not to say I don't support the idea of them or that I can't see their importance. My work is already unionized, but once legislation was passed allowing us to leave, I did. It's a moot point now, though, as once I became a supervisor, I was no longer covered by the union anyway. I am a therapist and work in community mental health. Ethically, I take issue with public funds being extracted from public employees to go to union political coffers, and I dislike how unions wade into non-labor politics. For example, I'm in rural Oregon, and supporting anti-gun legislation with our union dues is contrary to local values. Directly related to my union, I don't like how antagonistic they are towards administration, perpetuating an us versus them attitude. Anything is cause for not just complaint, but actively stirring dissent among the workers. They take credit for perks in the collective bargaining agreement when administration was already offering them and then complain about parts of the agreement that they actively argued for. I'll be honest, we have an extremely cushy job, way more than the average American, and the union acts like we are being used and abused by administration. They also clearly are only concerned with the union, not the employees, and most importantly, definitely not our clients, who are among the most at-risk members of society. So while the agreement might include a person getting weeks or months off to attend to union tasks, you are being paid while not seeing the clients that need you. Not to mention the lengths the union goes to protect inadequate employees. Honestly, I can't stand the people that are most active or visible in our union. It seems like a who's who of those who do the bare minimum, have the most to complain about, and are most likely to use the union to avoid accountability. With the clients we serve, frankly, I have zero tolerance for that behavior. Serve your clients or go somewhere else. I can already hear the naysayers telling me I'm making this up, that I'm a bot or anti-union, which only further entrenches my view. In general, I would be more pro-union if their supporters would at least acknowledge that they can bring their own issues along with the good. Story 22. I was working as a scientist at a national laboratory that had a union vote. However, it was quite different from, say, an auto manufacturer. We were more like white-collar workers, compensated based on merit. The union organizers had rather extreme ideas. From what I could gather, they appeared to be a small group of socialists based on their rhetoric, and it was unclear exactly what they could do for us. Their discussions were mostly class warfare rhetoric rather than a clear outline of the benefits of unionization. It was already challenging to fire people in our quasi-government organization, officially part of the government but not federal employees. We were better compensated than federal employees due to the structure while interacting with the U.S. government much like federal workers. Given this context, it was nearly impossible to terminate employees at that time, so we certainly had individuals who did nothing, and we could not get rid of them. Since pay was largely merit-based, those who did nothing received no raises, while the diligent workers received above-average pay increases. So what was this union really planning to achieve? Would it make pay based on seniority? There was minimal turnover, which would mean it would take a long time to move up, basically only if someone retired. Many worked their entire lives there. The only significant turnover came from programmers who could secure substantial pay increases elsewhere, something a quasi-government organization just could not match. For scientists, our pay was generally comparable to private industry. We already had a pension, which, having transitioned from biotechnology, was in some ways better. Stock options in biotechnology were not guaranteed wealth if the company underperformed, as was the case at my previous job where they became worthless. While profits could be made from stock options if everything went well, they depended heavily on favorable conditions. In contrast, our pensions were guaranteed and relatively generous, provided we stayed for at least 20 years, thus contributing to low turnover. Leveling the pay so that those who were unproductive received the same as me was not appealing, and the idea that my hard work would not influence my pay was also discouraging. From what I observed from those advocating for the union, the conversation revolved mainly around the workers versus management in a class warfare context. Yet, since management was already paying us well, and since firing people was difficult, I wondered how uniting to combat management would improve our situation. While having more influence over management would be beneficial practically, what changes would that bring? Our organization was not for profit, and our pay was determined by the federal government, which would not be altered by the union. So what would this increased voice in management truly accomplish? It might hypothetically lead to some improvement in decision-making that could enhance worker satisfaction, but those decisions were not so detrimental that we felt a desperate need for that voice. The disadvantages of seniority-based pay and union dues, combined with the potential for overall lower long-term pay compared to merit-based systems, seem significant with minimal advantages. Unsurprisingly, the unionization effort did not succeed. I am not opposed to unions per se. Rather, I have concerns about how unions function in the US compared to some European countries. I have witnessed unions harm the competitiveness of some companies in the US and, in some cases, drive them to bankruptcy. Demanding pay increases when companies are struggling seems disconnected from how unions should function. If higher pay is demanded during tough times, that pay won't matter if jobs are lost. Unions should eliminate seniority-based pay, allow compensation based on merit, and collaborate with companies. Union members could have a role in suggesting improvements to enhance competitiveness, thus guiding management away from poor decisions. Being part of the dialogue could help prevent harmful practices by management, avoid excessively high CEO salaries, and ensure union representatives are aware of the company's real situation. which could prevent demands that jeopardize everyone's jobs. During difficult periods, there should be a way for top management and workers to share challenges more equitably. I believe unions in some European countries operate more collaboratively than those in the US. Of course, for this to work, management would also need to change their approach. Additionally, using union dues for political donations does not directly benefit workers and should only occur if workers voluntarily choose to support such activities. All other union dues should be directed toward improving workers' conditions. Like management, union members should have a significant say in their leadership if they are not performing effectively. If these changes were made, there would likely be more success in unionizing white-collar workers. Having worked in white-collar environments where a union could have been beneficial in addressing poor management, I see potential in this model. However, current union tactics would not be effective in such situations. Many more people might be open to unions if they operated as I described. As mentioned earlier, the laboratory where I worked did not align with this model and followed an adversarial workers versus management approach, ultimately leading to the union vote being rejected. Story 23. The union wanted to force us to hire certain individuals based on factors other than competency and had a history of protecting underperformers, making it nearly impossible to dismiss someone who hindered progress. It fostered incompetence and inefficiency wherever it had influence, so I voted against it. I achieved my goal, rejecting the protection of underperformers. Story 24. My father worked part-time at Walmart prior to his passing. He told me that whenever there was a discussion about unionizing, Walmart threatened to take away everything that employees were not entitled to by law and made them fight for it. His store always refused to unionize, but this was also in Florida. Story 25. I want promotions and pay increases to be based on achievements and merits, not on how long I have been with the company. Additionally, underperforming employees should be dismissed. Story 26. It was a selfish decision. I was a relatively new hire and knew I would only be there for 6 months at most. Most unions run a lot of benefits by seniority, and I didn't want to be back at the bottom of the hierarchy. Story 27. My favorite thing about America is that they somehow messed up unions too. Like the one thing that defines workers' rights over corporate rights, and they found a way to make it bad for workers and confusing. Story 28. My last job had a union, and they misled us frequently and caused significant delays because many of the higher-ups were on vacation. For over a year, our contract had expired, and they did nothing. After the new contract was approved, they claimed it would not take effect until the following year, which was not accurate. You could never get a straight answer from anyone. They just kept running people in circles until you eventually gave up. I really liked that job, but the union made us feel like the peanuts they gave us were valuable. It was the worst union I have ever been forced to be a part of. I also heard they increased union dues to double what everyone was paying before. Story 29. 2 construction-related unions were trying to cater to all employees. The issue was that half of the workers were white-collar employees who did not understand our work and the challenges we faced. I expressed openness about having a union, but it was important for them to demonstrate that they would advocate for us as well. The response to our inquiries was simply to sign cards, with the promise that we would see results when it came time to negotiate. Clearly, this would influence our leverage in future negotiations. As a result, no union was established, and our group considered creating an association instead. This situation, combined with a new owner, prompted the significant changes we needed. I am unsure how it turned out for the other group. Story 30. I am a diesel mechanic. I worked at a union shop for my first job and made sure my second shop remained non-union. The president thanked me for my efforts against unionization. Many employees were unaware of how seniority affected younger workers, especially concerning overtime. In my last union shop, seniority meant you had to be 45 years or older for weekends off, 50 or older for summer vacations, 58 or older for overtime, and 62 or older for major holidays. Entry-level mechanics earned only 60% of what journeyman mechanics made, but were required to pay the same union dues and insurance. It quickly became evident to everyone that this was unfair. Most employees had been hired within the last 2 years, while I had 7 years at the shop, and other colleagues had at least 12 years of seniority. I asked all the new employees with small children how they felt about working weekends and all holidays, missing precious time with their families. That argument resonated with them. I shared my experience of starting out by eating ramen while older mechanics in their late 50s took all the overtime and bragged about their new fifth-wheel trailers or Harley bikes. Story 31. There are 3 reasons. Work rules hinder productivity. Protecting the least competent employees hurts those who perform well. And I do not want my money used for campaign contributions to politicians I do not support. Story 32. When you perform better than others at your level, an earnings-based adjustment limits your earning potential. Story 33. I felt we didn't need one. The pay and benefits were really good. Why pay union dues for something we didn't need? I worked at a place before this that was unionized. The union would protect people who were in the wrong. I saw it with my own eyes. Unions can become too big and powerful, losing any credibility they have. I don't think unions are necessarily bad or unneeded at times, but as they grow and gain more power, they seem to become corrupted. A union is supposed to help the workers if a wrong has been done, not protect a worker who has done wrong. Story 34. They seem to think they control all the workers and that we owe them our loyalty. If the unions are having a picket and you dare to walk through their picket line to go into work that day, they will try to intimidate you and talk about you as if you're some kind of traitor. They often use the term bootlicker as well. They never seem to deliver on their promises, which usually consist of claims that you will receive better wages if you support them. Some of them appear more interested in spreading their collectivist ideology than genuinely helping people. I would prefer not to have a union near my workplace. If the pay is insufficient, I would seek employment with a more competitive employer. However, that is rarely the case because unlike the average union supporter, I know how to manage my finances. I tend to live below my means and invest the excess. Story 35. Because unions often hurt workers more than they help in the end. I was the shop chair during our last negotiation. We went 3 months without a contract, which meant no raises, benefits, or anything else. All because they wanted to keep overtime as double time, even though what the company was offering meant significantly more money for anyone willing to work just 1 hour of overtime. Unions don't care about the workers. They care about control. Story 36. The union representatives misled us about several issues we knew were incorrect and were extremely rude. Our organization also has a special arrangement with a health insurance provider that offers us almost free, excellent health care, which would disappear and cost us hundreds of dollars a month under the union. It simply didn't make financial sense for us due to the U.S. healthcare system. Story 37. Because while in theory it's a good idea, in reality it's just another wealthy individual reaping most of the rewards on our behalf. Story 38. Because the union was just as pushy and entitled as the corporation. Unions develop into their own power centers and only exist because, as a lesser version of a powerful figure, they can operate in a void left by greater authorities. If the federal and state governments were good regulators, unions would have no opportunity. We may face negative outcomes in the end, but it is nice to have a choice. Story 39. Most unions are beneficial. I view them similarly to a homeowners association. Some of them fulfill their purpose effectively, while others may neglect a small minority who are overlooked or mistreated in the name of maintaining the union. Story 40. Because the unionized employees in this company only receive what is specified in their contract. When management announces a new bonus program or a change in benefits, they are not eligible. Story 41. I was a top performer and had been receiving 8% to 10% raises every year because the company feared losing me, while the average raise was around 4%. The entire pitch of the union organizing was a pay scale with uniform raises for everyone. Story 42. I have not been in this position personally, but I would not jump to conclusions and view it like any contract. Every union is different, just as every contract is unique. What I mean is that someone can vote against a specific union without being opposed to unions in general. They may not agree with the leadership structure, the fee structure, or something similar. Story 43. I am a registered nurse. My previous experiences with unions fit the stereotype of mainly protecting underperforming employees. I did not want to be part of that and did not feel I needed union representation to advance my career. I am more than capable of taking care of myself. Additionally, the organizers were primarily nurses whom I would not want near any of my loved ones. Story 44. My favorite successful unionization occurred recently when the attorneys who worked full-time for the state teachers union unionized. It was amusing to see the union members try to oppose it. Story 45. Speaking from experience, unions can be beneficial, but they often lead to negative attitudes among members. I have noticed that long-term employees tend to resent newcomers when we earn the same wages. To punish us, they withhold essential knowledge, both work-related and union-related. This behavior is disrespectful to the legacy of those who came before us. Story 46. Any union experience I had was not positive. It seemed to enable laziness and protect unproductive individuals from being dismissed. If having a union is deemed necessary, why would anyone work for such a poorly managed company? In my opinion, the better option is to find a company whose values align with my own. I cannot understand working for a company where I have to threaten them to be treated properly. Story 47. I can only speak to my fiancé's experience, as I am in a teacher union that was established long before I began working. She was dealing with a unionization effort led by several new employees who were highly politically engaged and had a long list of demands, only a few of which were related to workplace conditions or pay. She and her fellow employees decided they did not want to be used in a larger effort to leverage strikes for concessions from politicians. Story 48. I cannot afford the high monthly fee they want to charge me to be a part of the union. The way it was promoted made it seem like we would be forced to become members, regardless of our choice. Story 49. If I could join a union, I would, and I support protecting workers' rights. However, I have been in workplaces with incredibly strong unions. We had to take a class on what we could and couldn't tell union members. I couldn't approach a union member during his lunch break or ask him anything about work. If he didn't like me, he would tell his supervisor, "My work break starts right now." My supervisor got in trouble for ordering new office furniture without getting a change to the workplace approved by the union. We had employees who constantly showed up to work late, and all we could do was write a report to their supervisors. Story 50. Because I wanted to strategically position myself for a higher wage with increased benefits and bonuses. If I was considered with the rest of the group, it wouldn't have mattered what I did. Story 51. Story time. Gather round, kids. In the early 2000s, a new location of a large bookstore opened, and I was part of the team responsible for opening the store. They hired many people at once but planned to lay off a significant number of them after the holidays. This upset a lot of employees. Before long, the United Food and Commercial Workers Union managed to plant a few members in the initial crew. When it began to look like we would organize, nearly everyone was on board. The management seemed intimidating, but in retrospect, they were likely quite anxious and handled the situation as calmly and respectfully as possible in a corporate environment. As tensions rose, some employees were hesitant to speak up. They enjoyed the work environment and just wanted a relaxed part-time job. I started to notice numerous questionable tactics employed by the union organizers, which felt like psychological warfare. There were rumors suggesting it was best not to discuss the union with certain individuals. Otherwise, they would inform the management. First, the lead inside organizer took a young man under his wing. He provided him with a place to stay in his penthouse and spoiled him with gifts and food. At first, I thought this was kind, but I soon learned more about him. He claimed to have been a lawyer, but his reasons for working at a bookstore or how he could afford penthouse living on $7.25 an hour didn't add up. The two of them became pretty close with a couple of older employees who were sweet but not particularly great workers. Those older employees were the first to be laid off, and I heard through the grapevine that they were suing for age discrimination. To this day, I swear at least one of them was an actor. He had a mild disability that the company struggled to accommodate. Once the election date was set, I noticed that the kid living with the lawyer would go around asking people about their availability and when they would be home. "Oh, you're off Tuesday? Will you be around in the afternoon? I'm visiting my aunt in the morning, and she lives in your area. Want to hang out?" Tuesday afternoon arrived, and there was a knock on the door. I hoped it wasn't that kid. Instead, it was a very attractive woman with a low-cut blouse and a clipboard. She introduced herself as the lead organizer for the union and expressed a desire to work with me personally on the election. I told her I didn't want to discuss work on my day off, but I supported labor rights. She leaned in close, looked me in the eyes, and said, "Well, we don't have to talk about work. Maybe we can just get to know each other. Aren't you going to invite me in for coffee?" Then she lightly ran her hand down my arm and touched my hand. I was quite high at the time and did not say much. She asked if something was wrong and whether my girlfriend was home. She returned 3 or 4 more times, usually around the same time. In the meantime, a sweet older woman who truly loved her job was under a lot of stress. She was not in favor of the union and faced considerable pressure from her younger colleagues. This weighed heavily on her. Tragically, she had a heart attack and passed away one morning while getting ready for work. I can't say if her stress was related, but it was heartbreaking to think that she spent her last days worrying about everything. There were a few other instances that felt wrong, and although I can't pinpoint the exact tipping point, I came to realize that this was not a genuine organization by the workers, and we had good reason to be skeptical of both our management and the union. A friend confided in me that she also felt skeptical. I shared my perspective, explaining that I believed the union was using us to gain another win and possibly change the situation in our favor, but ultimately they were looking out for their own interests without asking us what we wanted. You want more money, right? You want someone to advocate for you, don't you? This friend confided that she was having issues with her husband, that she took the job to help pay for her cancer treatments, and that she didn't want to end up like our friend who passed away, spending all her time worrying. She decided to resign quietly and made the rounds to say goodbye. She found me last and expressed gratitude for reminding her that life is precious and quoted, "To thine own self be true." She then gave me a little peck on the cheek and left through the lobby while singing Brian Ferry's "More Than This." A couple of weeks later, we learned she succumbed to cancer. What a tragic union drive, right? I recall that the election was approaching not long after that, and the day before they called it off. So all that for nothing. It seemed that the union representatives realized they had alienated the workers. The lawyer had already submitted his 2 weeks' notice, and he sent the young man back to live with his family. I continued working there for about another year, and although it was a difficult job, they allowed me to get away with quite a bit. Without union involvement, it was somewhat enjoyable to work there in a state of normalcy. It felt like we never had the chance to experience the typical corporate drudgery before the union got involved. But wow, what a mess. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.